All right, welcome everybody back to the Big Douglas Show. This is a Super Monday. Every Monday is a Super Monday here on the show. With me, as always, is George Carmi. George, how was your weekend?
It was very good, man. Cold, and I enjoyed some good basketball. Though it was a good weekend. Can't complain.
There was some good basketball, and it didn't cause any controversy at all, which you gotta love.
Exactly
Uh,
right.
our guest today from PFF is Brad Spielberger Esquire. Brad, I've got to say, I've always been intrigued with the Esquire. What we got going on here with little ESQ at the end?
The joke is the running joke with my friends and whatnot is I went to law school, got the law degree. Technically, I guess I am an esquire. I'm not sure what esquire even means. Am I taking myself seriously by putting that on my Twitter? No. It's kind of like a running joke, but I mean, hey, the joke is I got this degree just so I could put comma ESQ on the end of my Twitter handle. That's what it's all about.
I would imagine that's an expensive three little letters then.
It did not come cheap. Yeah.
All right. We play the birthday game every Monday, Brad. So I will say some celebrities, and you two try to get as close to how old they'll turn this week. Let's see if we got these graphics here that we came up fancy with for this week. Here we go. Let's see. Robert Downey Jr. has a birthday this week. How old do you think Robert Downey Jr. is? Brad, we'll start with you.
56.
Not quite. George, what do you think about for Iron Man?
That's a good guess, actually. I'm thinking he's got to be in his 50s. He definitely was a star in the 80s as well. So I'm thinking maybe 53. Yeah, let's go 53. How about that?
58 for Robert.
There you go. Okay.
58. So that was a good guess. Okay, let's see. Next is Jesse Plemons. Jesse Plemons. This dude has been in all kind of stuff, by the way. I don't know if you've gone through much of his catalog, but he's in everything and in some really diverse stuff too. Jesse Plemons has a birthday this week. George, we'll start with you.
So it's funny. I don't really know much about him. He's a guy from Friday Night Lights, right? That's the guy who's
He
from
was,
there.
yep.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so he's a younger guy back at that
He
point.
did the Fargo, one of the Fargo seasons when they did the TV seasons. He was in
Okay.
there.
Okay. Let me say, I want to say early 40s. How about 42? I'll go with that.
Yeah, I was going to say 37.
Oh, Bray, close again. It's 35.
Oh, okay. Overshot that one. Okay.
That's right.
He's a great actor too. Side note.
Oh man, he's fantastic. He's fantastic. He did a Western recently for Netflix that was really, really good. All right, let's see. Billy D. Williams is next here. Billy D. Williams has a birthday. Brad, we'll start with you.
Ooh, I'll go 72.
He's definitely up there. I'd say probably more like 78, probably something higher 70s.
Billy D. Williams is 86 years old this
Ooh.
week.
Okay, good for him. Yeah, wow, okay.
Crushing the game. And finally, on today, Eddie Murphy actually has a birthday today. How old is Eddie?
Want me to go first? George, I think right in that Robert Downey Jr. range again. I'll say a little older. I'll say 58.
He's definitely in his 50s. He was killing it in the 80s, right? So add 40 more years. Maybe I'm a little bit, maybe 59. I go one higher than Brad.
Eddie Murphy turned 62 today.
Okay.
62. Not bad for Eddie.
Yeah, not bad at all.
What a career arc for Eddie, by the way, right?
100%. He definitely went from a comedian to a great actor to serious actor at some points. He's doing a good job.
All right, Brad, I was curious. I was looking through the stuff here. The Drafting Stage book is out. Tell me a little bit about it. What are we learning when we read the book, and how did you end up partnering with Jason on that thing?
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you bringing that up. So essentially a couple of years ago when I was getting into doing a lot of research on not only contract values, but also how to build a roster and building roster construction, asset management, all those things, I started looking more and more into draft trades. And the chart that is used is the Jimmy Johnson chart, as is often referred to, is kind of the currency that NFL teams use. If a trade is close to equal on that chart, odds are you can pull off and execute it. during the draft. So kind of looking at the history of where that came from. It was made in the late 80s when teams were struggling to make draft trades because they didn't know how to kind of, price each draft pick. And so as I'm sitting there, I'm saying, why would a currency that existed before the rookie wage scale still be controlling how we're valuing draft picks when that is a dramatic change in the values of each pick? So that premise alone kind of had me want to dive in and just research all these things, looking at different things. There's a famous paper about overconfidence in the NFL draft by Richard Thaler and Cade Massey, who are Penn Wharton, business school folks. And so, kind of just read all these different things and decided, hey, I'm going to come up with a new draft chart that is, focusing more on essentially our point values are actually tied back to what we did is we looked at every draft pick and the second contract they signed once they were able to hit free agency, and then said, okay, based on that, what is an average expectation of each draft pick based on, when they finally did get paid at a veteran level, what type of player were they? We took those values, converted it back into points. But yeah, so the book is all about like positional value, should you take a certain position super high or not, and all these various different ways to poke holes in how teams are building their roster in the draft.
As the draft is coming up, what are those, and have they changed over the years?
They absolutely have. I think we've seen that already. So again, I know this point has probably been beaten, to a pulp at this point. But one of the big takeaways of our book was, it was a couple of years after Saquon Barkley got taken second overall, and we're looking at the argument we made, since it's all tied to contracts, is the day that Saquon Barkley got drafted, he was the 5th highest paid running back in the NFL. The year later, Nick Bosa gets drafted second overall. Obviously, Chase Young the year after that. When Nick Bosa got drafted, he was the 37th highest paid edge rusher in the NFL. So both number 2 overall pick. I'm not talking about on-field value. I'm not arguing about, can Saquon, I'm not even getting into that whole conversation. It's a separate conversation. For me, it's all about when you're trying to build out a winning roster, a championship roster, you need surplus value, and you need to balance every free agency move and every draft pick move. That they're together, they're in tandem, they're not separate. So that was kind of one big takeaway of just, again, I'm not arguing do running backs matter and can they impact the game and yada yada. It's more just, hey, if you want to save money in free agency, you should draft an edge rusher super high, and then you can go spend a decent amount of money stuff like that.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just, if you'll pull up the question that we have this week, I think it fits in perfectly here, because one of the things that Washington has done here is paid interior D linemen. I think it surprised a lot of people because that has not been really the way teams have been roster building. George, do you have the question up and ready?
Yeah, it's processing right now. We'll see if it goes. And if you can pull it up, go ahead, Doug. And if not, I can kind of throw a quick question at you.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so Brad, besides quarterback and edge rushers, what are some other like big bang for your buck value positions you can kind of consider there? Like, is the wide receiver market pretty high up there, or is it cornerback, or what are you looking at there?
Wide receiver is definitely in that conversation. Offensive tackle is in that conversation. We'll get to the interior defensive line, but maybe somewhat of the more surprising result of our research, we also kind of looked at what are the odds you land a player at a certain position in later rounds, and that should impact your approach, right? Like if you another argument with running back, like you can also find really good running backs in the later rounds. You cannot find Daron Paynes and Jonathan Allens in later rounds. They don't exist. So, I'll leave it for the side. But yeah, so those positions, receiver, of course, cornerback definitely as well. Those are the big premium positions that cost a lot. They don't hit free agency very often. Like the receiver class being poor in free agency, that's because if you're good, you get extended before you hit free agency.
100%. I totally agree.
Well, I guess this thing's still uploading. I'm curious. I saw here edge rushers getting the 5th-year option, second lowest at only 54.5%. What do we glean from that? I was surprised by that number.
It is interesting. Yeah, I saw maybe the post from Sumer Sports you're referring to. They put out a tweet a couple.
Yes.
Yeah. So no, it is super interesting, no doubt. I think perhaps what's happening there is there are teams that are willing to pay for the truly elite talents at that position, but are not going to pay if a guy is kind of in that second tier and not quite there. They'll say, you know what, we'd rather, address that otherwise. But it's kind of like quarterback, where not to the same degree, but If you're an elite quarterback, you get 50 million. If you're above average, you still get 40 million. If you're the Derek Carrs and Kirk Cousins of the world, like the mid-market doesn't really exist. That's kind of the same with edge rusher. I mean, not trying to like throw shade or anything, but would I pay Bradley Chubb $22 million a year? No chance. Like some of these guys they're fine, but in my opinion, is a clear number 2 edge rusher. They still get, low end number 1 money. I'm guessing that's probably part of the equation here with the edge rushers as well.
Gotcha.
Okay, I think we got the question up. We'll give it a try here.
Let's try it out real quick.
Here we go. Colin Dunphy, he is huge into the numbers, and he was excited to hear you were coming on today. You got this one, George, or no? It's not playing.
I'm trying it out. I guess it's not going through. Let me try one more time.
Technology at its greatest here.
You can't hear it, huh?
No, it's not playing.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's not going to work.
Essentially what it was, Brad, was he was looking at the Steelers model of being able to pay multiple defensive linemen according to how much of the cap it takes, and wanted your opinion on if it's possible. I think in Commander land, there's this foregone conclusion, right? That you paid John, you paid Payne, and that's it. The other 2 edge rushers, you'll have to move on from them because you just can't afford to do it. The Pittsburgh model suggests maybe that's not quite accurate.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Just to add on, just to give you more context, Brad, I guess Colin kind of went into the fact that the Steelers allocate 26% of their salary cap to the defensive line. And Colin was kind of inquiring, like, all right, they're building their defensive line. How are they, in terms of roster construction, how do you work around that in regard to the draft and free agency and things like that? Like, do you think it's a wise decision? Do you think it's capable of handling, kind of manipulating, in your opinion?
Yeah. So first off, Colin's a great follow on Twitter and you got to talk back and forth with. So I appreciate him and appreciate the question. Yeah. So 100%. Look, if you're going to have a philosophy of we win up front, look at the San Francisco 49ers, for example. You're already paying Eric Armstead $17.5 million a year. You just signed Javon Hargrave for 4 years, $84 million. And I think Nick Bosa is going to sign a deal for $33 million a year this offseason. So if that is your strength, if you want to build up front, you, of course, then have to make tough decisions. Like, I think the Commanders probably need another linebacker. They probably need another corner. That is the kind of the price you pay. But the Steelers also, if you look at their roster, the Steelers could probably use another linebacker and another corner as well. So, the Niners have gone about the same way that they spend at certain spots. So as long as you know how to balance that, I would say more so with the offense as well, not just, looking at the secondary or the back seven, whatever you want to call it, but also can you still have money for your offensive line, for your weapons, all of those things? Yes, there's no doubt about it. Do I guess they're going to pay all 4? Probably not. But look, Montez Sweat is extension eligible. Are they going to take the risk like they just did with Deron Payne of not paying him this offseason? He has a monster year and then gets maybe a bigger contract than they expected. I don't know. I think Sweat played phenomenally the last couple of years. And then Chase Young, obviously, the injuries are tough, but every time he does play, he shows up great in all of our metrics as a pass rusher, as a run defender. He shows why he was a second overall pick. So can you do it? Yes. It obviously is difficult, especially like if it's 4 dudes. That's not really something we've seen. But 3, is doable.
Do you think we're getting to the point where interior pressure is catching up with that edge pressure as far as what teams really covet? You talk to the quarterback and they much rather be able to move around the arc than to be put off their spot immediately. It feels that way with some of these big numbers coming out. I mean, I can't only imagine like what a guy like Chris Jones will get next time he's due up, right? It feels like Deron took a little bit of a hometown deal. I think he probably could have gotten a bit more if he hit the market. What are you seeing here as far as interior pressure goes?
So 110%. And I think you're seeing that league-wide in a couple different ways. I mean, first, just the way teams are addressing this position this offseason, including Deron Payne, is a signal. So Chris Jones is due for a contract this offseason, and I think it's going to be $25 million plus per year. I think Quinnen Williams is going to get 25 plus. I think Jeffrey Simmons in Tennessee is going to get 25 plus. Dexter Lawrence in New York could get I think, I don't know about hometown discount, but he definitely might look back in 6 months or 4 months, whatever, right before the season and be like, shoot, I thought I was signing the second highest contract for an interior defender, and now I rank like 7th, at the position. So that said, I think it's still a strong deal, 4-year term, good guarantees, all that. But yes, so the position is being valued more and more. We're going to, free agency, a guy like Draymond Jones, a good player, but, over $17 million a year to go to Seattle is a huge deal. Zach Allen, above average player, getting over $15 million a year. It is, the NFL is showing you, and I think what's interesting too is we get Quentin Nelson now making $20 million a year. He then gets immediately surpassed this offseason by Chris Lindstrom with the Atlanta Falcons, or maybe tied at $20 million per year. So yeah, like in a lot of different ways, there is a signal of the fastest way to a quarterback is a straight line. They are closer, and the teams no longer view it as edge guys, quarterback pressure, interior guys, run stuffers. It's like, no, like get a skill set, get a talent out there, and figure it out. Aaron Donald has changed this sport forever.
Right.
He definitely did. Brad, do you have any predictions of like a potential like market correction? Just seems like everyone's getting paid these enormous contracts, whether it's a edge rusher or a quarterback or a wide receiver. Is there ever going to be like a burst in the bubble where things kind of retract a little bit, or maybe they start like erring more on the sides of like, fading more towards the draft, for instance, right? So like last year, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, all these wide receivers were coming out. Do you think like a surplus of wide receivers could potentially bring down the wide receiver bubble or anything in that regard? What have you found over your studies?
Yeah, so I think we saw that in free agency this year with wide receiver and with tight end, frankly. I mean, none of those guys got paid, right? And I mean, I don't think it's an accident. I think it's like you're saying, there's so many quality options in every draft. Even this year's draft is not viewed as a good class for wide receiver, but I'm sure we'll still get 3 or 4 guys that go in the first round. I think there is some solid depth behind them as well. So I think we're seeing it to a degree. For interior defensive line, just to tie it to that, Aaron Donald signed a $22.5 million per year deal, what Daron Payne just got in 2018, and no one had surpassed him or even reached him in 4 off seasons. And then Daron Payne finally ties him. Of course, he's now over $30 million on his raise he received. But yeah, so like I think we almost arguably like that market was way behind and now is just catching up. So there are ebbs and flows. It goes back and forth. I think receiver was due, and finally it happened, and now maybe it'll go back a little bit, but they all do. If you just monitor position market growth compared to salary cap growth over a number of years, they tend to be in line, but obviously the salary cap's stable, and the position markets kind of jump up and down based on talent. Yeah,
makes sense.
It felt, Brett, it felt like this was going to be the year where tight ends started getting paid, and they did not. I mean, I think a lot of people thought Dalton Schultz was going to get like a big old bag of money. He did not. What is it about the position that teams refuse to pay for? Because it feels like we're heading into this point where everybody wants these guys, right? Like when you have ones that can block and run routes, it's a cheat code, but nobody's paying.
Yeah. So look, I do the projections for PFF and all and I think it was all right, but I was way off on the entire tight end market. Just could not have been more wrong. And I really was trying to, or what I predicted was, like we saw with guys like Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith and some of the players that have come up recently, those guys both signed for $12.5 million a year, right below the top of the market at $15 million per year with George Kittle. So we saw those second tier players getting just below the top of the market. And then Dawson Knox signs his 4-year, $52 million extension with Buffalo last offseason. David Njoku, about $13.5 million per year. I thought that trend would continue. And instead, what I think happened was, Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith were bad in New England. David Njoku was pretty darn good in Cleveland. I think it looks good. Dawson Knox, I'm sure Buffalo would like to have that one back. Just was not very good last year. And so I think it's more, again, kind of like we're talking about different positions. If it's not one of the elite talents, we'll just sit there in free agency and take a 1-year flyer on some guy or kind of go cheaper. Schultz still, though, did shock me because, like you said, look, Mike Gesicki, I get it. He's a slot receiver that is just tall. Like Dalton Schultz is an all-around good NFL player, and I cannot believe no one was willing to pay more than 1 year, $7 million on a flyer.
The other, I was just going to follow that up. The other one is safety, right? Like the more and more it feels like, particularly in Washington, where we're using 4 and 5 defensive backs, many of them 3 and 4 safety sets. Again, I thought maybe this would be the year that safeties would start getting money. 2-part question. They did not get the money that I thought most of them would get. And then the other one is Cam Curl is coming up soon for an extension. What do you think one looks like for him? And do we in Washington maybe overvalue him compared to what the league sees?
So, first on the market, that one I do think it's more of just there are so many available talents at the position. There's just simply too many good players. Again, the whole great versus good thing. But unlike a tight end or a receiver where some free agent markets are weak, other years it's strong. Safety always has like 10 to 12 dudes that can come in, start for you, give you 1,000 quality snaps, and again, not be difference making players, but be solid players. So I think that suppresses the market. Obviously, Jesse Bates got paid, but pretty much no one else at safety did this offseason, which I wasn't super shocked by. I had most guys besides him not doing particularly great. Obviously, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson surprised a lot of people. You get the feeling that's not totally a football-related thing, and that we never can really account for. So Cameron Curl, I don't think people in Washington are overestimating him. He grades super, super well for us. He's good against the run, a good coverage player. You just throw on the tape. I mean, they move him around a lot. He can play a little bit in the slot if you want him to. He can do a lot of different things. I think obviously McCain last year they put in the slot and tried to kind of mix and match their safeties to a degree. But I think he can do a lot, and that are the guys who gets paid. Is the Derwin Jameses and Minka Fitzpatricks of the world are going to get paid more often than just your deep third free safety that just sits back there and kind of ball hawks. Sure, it's valuable, but I think teams are more into the guys that can maybe play a couple man coverage reps against tight ends or come down and make plays or rush the pass or whatever. And I think Curl is a pretty, versatile player. So for me, I look at kind of like a Jalen Thompson who signed with the Arizona Cardinals, like a 3-year, $36 million. I think we'll get a better deal than that. But another late round draft pick, good all-around player. If I had to guess, I would say 3 years, $40 million, somewhere in that range, I think is where Curl could end up.
Yeah, so Brad, I got a question for you. So as someone that studies the whole salary cap construction, I find the whole quarterback salary things, very intriguing to me, right? With, Lamar Jackson and asking for his guaranteed contracts and things like that. Do you think that, potentially building around a top flight, top 10 quarterback with a $50 million contract is still the prudent decision in 2023? Do you think building around a rookie quarterback is kind of more the right path? Because just to touch on, I'm looking at the top 10 salaries. We have Russell Wilson at number 2 with $49 million, Kyler Murray, $46 million, Deshaun Jackson, Matt Stafford, Dak Prescott, Daniel Jones are all up there. I'm just curious if it's still smart to still pay these guys big bucks. What do you think?
So a couple of the guys you mentioned. So Daniel Jones is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, where there's no mid-market, right? Where he should, in theory, take $30 million a year, and then you could try to actually spend around him and build out a team, but that just doesn't exist. It's not really a thing you can do. So would I pay him that? No chance. But you go back and look. I know there's always the stat that floats around, no quarterback earning X percent of the cap has won a Super Bowl in a certain amount of years. First of all, Mahomes just destroyed that stat, and I know he's Mahomes, but second of all, I always hated that stat because if you just zoom out to who participated in the conference championship games, it's all the highest paid quarterbacks. You need to have an elite quarterback in this league to win. Yeah, I mean it's the beauty of the rookie contract thing is you can have a Jared Goff on a rookie deal, you can have a Jalen Hurts on a rookie deal, good players, but they're not Patrick Mahomes, they're not Aaron Rodgers. I think you have to have one or the other. Either pay a guy that is elite or go back to the well. What I want to see a team do is they come up for an extension with a guy like a Jared Goff when the Rams had this decision and say, you know what? Yeah, he's good. He made a Super Bowl. We didn't score a touchdown in that Super Bowl. Sean McVay's been holding his hand the entire time. His surroundings have been incredible, and he makes a lot of dumb decisions. And they don't pay that guy. Instead, they go back to the well in the draft. It's just so hard. I know it's hard for teams to do that. I know general managers it's an armchair GM thing to say. I get it's easier said than done. But I think the kiss of death is paying, a guy who ranks in the 12 to 18 range. That is the thing that you have to avoid doing.
I agree.
Pay the guys at the top, be wary of the guys in the middle. Where are you on Goff? Because I think maybe I like him a little bit more than others. I see people mocking the Lions to draft a quarterback, and it feels like maybe it's a year too early for that.
Yeah, so I do think the contract that the Detroit Lions inherited is fine. It becomes a mid-tier deal because obviously you pay out a bunch of bonuses in Los Angeles that does not travel to the new team. I want to say he's owed less than $60 million over the next 2 years, just below that. So yeah, like I think you can win with Jared Goff making $27 million a year over the next 2 years or something in that range, no question. I had them actually trading up to third overall to take Anthony Richardson in a mock.
I saw
did.
that.
Yeah, look, I do like Goff as well. It was on an absolute tear to close out the season. I think for me, the thing is, so A, why I did that? He has 2 years left on his deal. There are like $5 million in guarantees this year remaining, and nothing else beyond that. So it is kind of getting to the end of the road of where if you like him, either you extend him after this season or you want to have a new guy in there pretty quickly. I like Goff. I think he's a great pocket passer, can make every throw. My thing is just in today's NFL, like your offense, your playbook is shrunk because he has no athletic ability with his legs really at all. You don't need to be Anthony Richardson. I get that. There's only one of those. But I think it's hard to have a guy who's that, much of a statue in today's NFL.
And so why so much hype on Bryce Young? Small and doesn't move. Like, I mean, I get why, but if we're looking at what you're talking about here, feels like he wouldn't be at the top of the market anymore.
So doesn't run the ball, but he makes the best plays outside of structure that I've seen in a couple of years, right? So I agree. He's not going to get you carries. He's not Jalen Hurts, not Justin Fields. But if you want a guy that can throw off platform, going to both directions, can make chicken soup out of finish the sentence, like Bryce Young is that guy. I think that is why you see him so high. It's another trend too, where and Jared Goff's a good example. We used to think, okay, who's the guy that can have a 5-step drop, 7-step drop, get to the top of their drop, find the open receiver, make the throw? That's our top guy. And now it's like, who can have Aaron Donald rushing up the middle and another guy off the edge, can do a 360 spin, get out of it, and then Patrick Mahomes sidearm it to a guy. Like, that's now what we're looking for. Of course, it's hard to find those guys. And Bryce Young, is very good outside of structure.
Gotcha. One case study that I find pretty interesting too is the Bengals, right? They basically have Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase back-to-back drafts, right? They're sitting at $16 million in the salary cap. What do you foresee? I mean, you foresee top of the market deals for both of them, and can the Bengals potentially survive that? Like, do you think the window is right now, or do you think they can still build around a major top of the market wide receiver quarterback contract?
I think the window is pretty much right now. I'm never going to close the door. I respect Joey B saying, the window is my career and all that stuff. And I do think he is a top 3, top 5 quarterback in the NFL right now. So I get all that. But if you're paying him, which I expect this offseason, above $50 million a year, I think he will. At week 1, I would guess he's going to be the highest paid cornerback in the NFL. And then I think obviously Chase, we still have more time before we get to his extension. But I think he's even making $30+ million a year by the time he does sign that deal. When we get there, it's going to be tough. Look, I mean, the Bengals themselves are not really an organization that wants to spend a ton of money to begin with. They'll, of course, extend their guys that are elite top 5 picks. But another thing I did that everyone hated me for this offseason, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I mocked the trade of T. Higgins. I wasn't saying the Bengals are trying to trade T. Higgins or they want to trade T. Higgins. I would be surprised if they extend him this offseason, and he's going into that 4th year. He's in the Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, like that. He's in that offseason. And I feel like Cincinnati is going to have reservations of doing it. And so my mind was just like, yeah, maybe he asked for a trade. They probably won't grant it. They'll probably make him play again, franchise tag him, do what the Bengals are more comfortable doing. But that's why I did it, because I don't see all, we're talking about the defensive line for Washington. I think paying those big 3 in Cincinnati is going to be tough.
Mm-hmm.
In your mock, you had the Commanders taking Bijan Robinson at 16. As George knows, that made half our fan base extremely excited, and it made the other half want to jump off a cliff. Why did you like Bijan there at 16? And will he be there in your next mock draft?
It's funny. I only saw the people that hated it, so you got to send the people that loved it to my Twitter mentions if you could. Just funnel them over. So. Yeah. So I'll be honest. Like, I think he's going to go in the top half of the first round. It's just very hard to figure out who it's going to be. Why did Washington? I know some people said, hey, they have 2 good backs. They do. I mean, Antonio Gibson's going into his last year. I think they've shown that they like him, but they don't love him. Obviously had some injuries. I think he's a good receiver too. So he's, maybe you could use him in a little bit different way. I think Brian Robinson is a good player, not really a dynamic player, not going to break off big gains. He's a good early down running back that is solid. I think neither guy really prevents you from taking, if you view Bijan Robinson as we do, right, as like a top 5 talent in this entire class, probably the best prospect at the position since Saquon Barkley in 2018, those guys, all due respect to them, are not stopping you from making that pick. And then secondly, the two-headed monster of GM of Martin Mayhew and Marty Hurney, I think I mentioned this in the article itself, they've spent a ton of top 100 picks on running back. Now, of course, the league has changed. For Mayhew, that's when he was, the Lions GM in 2008, 2015. Hurney was with Carolina forever. I get that it's a new league, but from those two perspectives, like I disagree with the argument that they have enough there. I don't agree with that. And then secondly, just that they obviously, their GMs have done it before. But yeah, I'll promise you now, when I do my second mock, I mix it up. I won't have Bijan, going to Washington.
How far inevitably do you think the Carter slide goes, and is there a slide on Carter? Because I think it's off the field stuff is the only reason, right? Because other than that, he's the best prospect in the draft. I know these guys take falls for stuff like that. It also feels like maybe history has taught us that they shouldn't all the time. How far do you think the slide happens?
Yeah, I definitely will call it a slide because I agree with you. Him not being the first non-quarterback taken is a slide to me because I think from a pure talent standpoint, that's how good he is. I said, not based on anything I know, I set the floor for him at 10. You guys know, I don't see Howie Roseman sitting there at 10th overall with a draft pick that is not even his. It's New Orleans Saints draft pick. And they lose Javon Hargrave. They need to address 3 tech. Yeah, they re-signed Fletcher Cox, but he's old and I think was not great last year compared to the phenomenal player we've seen for a decade now. I just don't see a scenario where Howie Roseman does not take Jalen Carter at 10.
And as a Georgia fan who roots for the Commanders, every time the Eagles select one of my beloved Bulldogs, which they've been big on the last couple of years, it pains me in my heart.
It stings a little bit. Hey, Brad, is there a particular prospect that you're particularly high on, compared to other people in the draft market, as well as someone you're particularly low on? You're kind of like everyone's talking about they love it, but you don't necessarily buy in.
Yeah, so for the first answer, and now the ship has sailed, the steam is gone, but I've been pounding the table for Christian Gonzalez. And this isn't like, he's been a top 10 pick for everyone. I get that. But I had him as the first defender taken in my mock draft. When I posted that, the odds you could bet on that were about 40-1. It's now 7.5-1. So, it's not, I'm not saying it's because of my mock draft. I think a lot of people have started to kind of talk about that and put that onto the ethos that he could maybe be that player. I just think, look, I get there could be more aggression in his tape. I get everyone's falling in love with Devin Witherspoon. I'm from Illinois. He is an awesome, tenacious defender. I think Christian Gonzalez, built in a lab to be an NFL cornerback, is just a freak athlete, but also can flip his hips, can do everything you could possibly ask for. So, like I said, it's not like I'm picking some deep sleeper. He's like a top 10 pick for everyone, but I just think he should be a top 5 pick. And I don't even get why we're arguing him versus other corners to go first off the board. So I'll go that one. Other side of the spectrum, I don't dislike the player. I do think he has the best tape, but I don't think Peter Skoronski, the Northwestern tackle, is going to be the first tackle drafted. And I get sometimes we mock the arbitrary cutoffs on measurables and all those things. For tackle, it's 33-inch arms is kind of the number that they always say you have to have at least that to play tackle in the NFL. He does not have that. Again, it doesn't mean you're incapable of playing that position, but I just think Broderick Jones, another more Georgia guys, I think he's probably going to be the first tackle taken in this class, or maybe Paris Johnson from Ohio State. And I'm not even saying I dislike him. I just think, again, it's more kind of me talking about where guys go. I won't be surprised if they jump ahead of Skoronski, even though every mock draft you can find would have that the reversed.
Gotcha.
Let's get out of here on this one. I'm curious, Brad. Plenty of guys doing their own deals without an agent. And it's worked out fine. Laramie Tunsil has reset the market twice now before he hit 30. Where did Lamar go wrong? Was there nothing Lamar could have done right in this situation? Ravens get all the cards, because of and I'm not saying they're not using them to the best of their advantage, but how have we gotten here with this Lamar Jackson thing? And is it really because he doesn't have an agent?
So it's twofold for me. So first, you mentioned Laremy Tunsil. He does not have an agent, but he does use an advisor named Saint Omni, who has negotiated a lot of deals. He actually has negotiated a Baltimore Ravens teammate of Lamar Jackson in Roquan Smith contract as well. So not having an agent, okay, fine. Go hire a phenomenal lawyer and go hire an advisor like a Saint Omni that has experience in this market, knows how to give you good guidance. To my understanding, I don't know for a fact, I don't think Lamar Jackson has a true advisor in his camp. Again, that might be wrong, but this Ken Francis guy that everyone was laughing about on Twitter, I don't think he's that guy. I think him and Lamar are making, custom gyms you can bring with you on the go, whatever.
I saw that.
I don't think he's in that market. So that for me is A. And then B, not to take away from Laremy Tunsil, Roquan Smith, DeAndre Hopkins, or Saint Omni, those negotiations were literally make me the highest paid player in my position, or let's just not talk, right? And it was that easy to where when you get into you are a franchise quarterback, you probably should become one of, if not the highest paid quarterbacks at signing. But we're talking a 9-figure contract here, like $200-300 million contract with a guy that missed, 5 games each of the last 2 years. Yes, he has a play style. It's probably, in my opinion, overblown. I think he can pass from the pocket, but of course, you're going to get questions of, does his play style hold up well? All these things. It's not as straightforward and as simple as I think a 3-year deal for Laremy Tunsil when Baltimore probably wants to sign a 6-year deal, for Lamar Jackson. So, hey, maybe he'll get it done. Maybe he looks smart in the end if he goes the Kirk Cousins route and goes tag, and then gets all the leverage in the world. But I think that's the two things. It's just not as clean as those ones. And then, no agent, if you have a great advisor, is different than, truly not having someone in your corner that knows how to navigate these waters.
What do you think will be the outcome with Lamar?
I genuinely think he's going to play for the Baltimore Ravens on a franchise tag in 2023.
Yep. Okay.
I agree.
Brad, this was great, man. Thanks. We learned a ton of stuff here, which is always the plan. When's the next mock draft come out? What else is on the horizon for you?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So first, I'll have an article coming out this week just about a couple draft trades I like. So obviously, all first round and kind of gets into that a little bit. And then I'll wait for mock draft 2.0 probably the week before the draft actually happened, or the week of the draft, I should say. So yes, keep an eye out for that. We'll get a great maybe tackle, maybe corner going to the Washington Commanders.
Brad, we appreciate your time today. Absolutely.
Thanks, Brad. Appreciate it. All right, man. Cool. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.